Angular is just one of many JavaScript frameworks, right, that are refer to themselves as MVC frameworks, right, JavaScript frameworks. So MVC, right, it's a design pattern that has been very, very successful for quite a while in web development, since the mid 90s, right? And has been proven very much has matured over time, and Angular and many other frameworks in JavaScript have copied or they're using a lot of those same good ideas, right, now on client side. Right? It allows you to think about applications in a tiered way, right? To think about the different concerns of the different tiers independently from each other. Okay, it's always a common and good practice in general in computer science to have different concerns, right? To distinguish what are the concerns, what different tiers are, to think about it in different contexts. So what MVC says is that you should think about applications into three buckets, right? And you have the view bucket, right? And that its concern is what the user sees, right? So its concerns are how you lay out things, right? How what the interactions are, receiving events from the user, showing data to the user. So those are the concerns: to look pretty, right? To provide good white spacing, right? To center things, to have justification, be mobile friendly. All those are concerns of the view, right? The view, for instance, should not be concerned how the data is structured, right? What are the various relationships between different pieces of content, right? Its concern is to look pretty, right? To show data for the user. Its concern is to interact with the end user. That is its concern, right? To display data to an end user, to a human being, specifically, and to receive events, interaction with the user. Yes, those are the concerns of the view. Then you have the controller, right? That has the concern of interacting, of receiving data for the or events that are generated by the user, right? And now the user has dealing with people is always messy, right? They're slow, they're inconsistent. And so what we try to do here is that try to gather all the information that is messy, we have to break up content just so that we don't overload the user, right? It might not be the best way to structure the data, but it's the best way to show it and display it to the user, right? So it has all concerns about user experience, right? It's because of users have a very low bandwidth, right? We type with meat sticks, right? That's a very low bandwidth, right? And we read and consume data at a higher bandwidth, right? But it's still slow. We have to break up content in particular in different pages and whatnot. All that is concerns of the user. We want to capture all that data and convert it into some structured, formal representation of that data. Yes? And we also want to be able to capture all that low bandwidth interaction of clicking and dragging and typing and all those events, right? We want to handle all those events somewhere here in object-oriented world. Yes? Right? So all that concern of gathering data from the view, right, and converting it into some formal representation, handling all those events, responding to those events, right? So shuffling data from the view and to the view, right, is the responsibility of the controller. Okay. Now, a command from the view might concern doing a lot of very complex actions, right? Or a lot of complex data manipulation, right? That is not the concern of the controller, right? The controller is only the middleman that is getting all that messy world, human world things, right? Converting it into some formal representation, and then the controller knows who is responsible to do all that hard manipulation of data manipulation, right? All that hard transformation of data, right? That representation of all the data. That's the concern of the model. Right? So the model is responsible for updating data, removing data, creating new data, maintaining all the relationships between the various object instances, right? That for each one of these, there's two of those, right? And that needs one of those, or maybe an array of those, right? And if you remove one of those, you also have to remove one of those as well, right? So all those concerns of how you represent the data, how you structure it, whether it's a linked list, whether it's you split it up into many different tables or one table, you normalize it and whatnot. All those are the concerns of the model, right? And the model doesn't care how this data eventually gets represented, right? The representation, I could represent it in a pie chart, as a graph, as a really cool 3D model. The model doesn't care who sees this and how it's represented. Right? All these layers have different concerns. Yes? Right? And this has proven to be a very good way of splitting up the various concerns on who's responsible for what. Right? And some folks, right, have made a career in each one of these buckets. Right? Certainly you can find developers who spend all their career over here. Right? They're all doing HTML, they're doing CSS, they're doing some like JavaScript, right? And it's certainly a very lucrative place to be, right? Some folks, you find that they're all only here, right? They're doing lots of JavaScript, lots of event handling, a lot of framework. They do some light HTML, but they don't have the artist look. They don't know how to make things look pretty, right? And it's not their concern. They prefer to have someone with those skills handle that, right? They'll know how to render maybe an HTML page and whatnot, but it's not their. They don't know how to make it look professional, right? It's not their concern. And you have yet other folks that spend all their careers here, right? Doing a lot of data modeling and architecting and business logic and data representation and optimizing data access, right? So we're going to be spending our semester going all the way across this entire stack. Okay? On the view, we're going to have a lot of HTML, right? We're going to be using a lot of custom, certainly some native, mostly native HTML and CSS, yes? But some tags are going to be some custom tags that we're going to be creating ourselves, right? And we're going to have some rendering logic here that iterates over arrays or has logic whether to display this but not that. But if you click this, hide it, or show this, or there's a lot of concern of how to lay it out and actually render the content is going to be spent over here, right, on the templating side, right? And Angular provides a lot of hooks that allow you to iterate over data and display content and lay it out, and that's the concern of the view, right? That's a little bit of what you saw in the HTML today, right? We have custom tags that we can generate, right? And somehow magically they connect to some JavaScript. Yes. So the concern here is using those tags and how to lay it out, whether they're nested inside of each other, whether they're collections, they're how we render that. That's the view. On the controller side, we're going to be using mostly directives and components. Today we saw a very trivial component, right? And its responsibility will be to create event handlers that can listen for clicks and drags and clicks and typing, as the user interacts with the event with the template, and listening for all those events that come in and handling something or manipulating some data. Okay, and also providing providing data to the view, grabbing data from the view, and then sending it over to a data model that either you add data, or you manipulate data, or you somehow edit that, manipulate this model to be stored in the database, right? Typically between these two layers, there's typically another layer called the service layer, right? That shuffles the data across these two, because typically these two things are working, are running on the client side, on the browser, whereas the data model typically is running on the server side, right? On a database, perhaps together with the business logic. And there is a mechanism between these two that shuffles the data across, often referred to as the service layer, which we'll talk about a little later. So this component side is going to declare variables, they're going to declare arrays, going to declare objects, right, that are going to be sent over onto the view for rendering purposes, right? So on this world, we never see HTML. We never see any reference to actual HTML. So the JavaScript has no idea what the HTML looks like, and the HTML doesn't know anything about the data side, right? So there's a very hard, right, barrier between these two that make us deal with each one of these in its own concerns. That makes sense? Right. So here's the components. We're going to spend some time here with the lots of components. On the controller layer, we're going to create services that are going to provide this data for the controller layer. That's going to be shuffling the data across the controllers and the servers and the data model on the server. Okay. Right. So a little context there. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here.